Hello, I am Laura.
Hi, I'm Deanne.
And I'm Philippe.
And welcome to our Lymond Book Club, where we are kicking off book 5, The Ringed Castle.
The book.
Yay!
And we're going to cover the first 3 chapters. I will lead the discussion, but before we dive into each chapter, Dee and Philippe, you want to share your first impressions of this book?
I liked it. I'm looking forward to this book. I really like that we got to see the Philippa first coming to Scotland part. Like, that was really good. And I'm super intrigued with Russia and Moscow and all of the shenanigans and intrigues that are going to happen there. And Ivan seems like a super interesting antagonist, maybe. I don't know. So I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I'm incredibly happy that the book started off with Philippa, so that Dorothy did not make us wait to get that payoff, especially Kate's moment where she's like, Philippa!
Yeah.
Like, ooh, she is not pleased.
Yeah, it was good.
I'm also intrigued by what's happening in Russia. I'm really sort of interested in what the heck Guzelle wants out of all of this. Does she think she can sort of influence her power in Russia now? And I think we're going to spend a lot of time in the next few months talking about what the hell is up with Danny Hislop. Who is he and what is his deal? Because he seems a bit crazy. So
bonkers.
Yeah. Oh, and Adam Blacklock is back. I'm so excited.
And Guthrie. And it was really fun to see those guys again. And yeah, when they showed up, I was just like, oh, yay. And then, yeah, the new guy's whole thing with Maeve, I'm like, what's going on there?
Yeah.
So interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It gives him a excuse to talk to himself while pretending he's not talking to himself, and therefore gives us even more of his witty commentary. All right, should we dive in?
Yes.
All right. So chapter 1 has my favorite opening line of any of the Lymond books, I'm pretty sure. And it is not to every young girl is it given to enter the harem of the Sultan of Turkey and return to her homeland a virgin.
Good line.
Yes. And since the first line of a book, if it's a well-written book, generally gives you an idea of some of the tone and themes of the whole book, what did this first line set you guys up to expect from this book? I'm just curious.
Well, I sort of started thinking, okay, wait, maybe this book is going to be a little lighter than the last one, just because this does feel like the tone of this first line really reminded me of it is a truth universally acknowledged that every young man, the whole beginning of Pride and Prejudice, like it really felt tonally like the same. So I'm sort of set up to expect like witty lines and maybe some satire, and maybe not like horrible death of toddlers, hopefully, in this one. But then we do get some death coming up in chapter 3. Like we get a sort of this really this ambush, and but nobody that we care about dies. So
yeah,
so I don't know. We'll see.
Just a couple of red shirts that die.
Yeah, just the red shirts. So like we don't care about them.
What about you, Philippe?
I don't know, it kind of sets up almost immediately that, like, I mean, this is not the kind of book I think any would pick up without having read the first 4. But like you see right away that like Philippa has had this incredible experience and this incredible growth. And like she's about to return back to a place where she's not going to be recognized as the girl she was when she left. And we see that in this chapter, how I forget if it's Sibylla or Kate that's looking for Philippa when she first comes up, and she's like, oh, there's this graceful woman who probably couldn't be bothered with, oh wait, no, that is Philippa. What?
Right.
So,
It's
Yeah.
Kate, it's her own mother.
Yeah.
It's Kate. And she's like, yeah, there's this lovely woman who probably isn't giving my daughter the time of day. Wait, it's my daughter.
Mhm.
I also think this opening line is really interesting because this is the first, I'm pretty sure it's the first opening line in a Lymond book that does not mention Lymond at all. It's all Philippa this time around. So
Yeah, I was glad that it didn't start with Lymond.
Yeah.
sick of that guy.
It's not that I'm sick of him. And I know that it's the Lymond Chronicles, so they're about him, but like we're giving story and breadth to probably what I think at this point is the secondary character. Like, you know, how you have your like main character, and then like there's always sort of a not a ranking, but like a list of who falls below them. And like Philippa's really starting to take that place as like a second protagonist of this book, main protagonist.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. And I like her so much, you know, it's fun to see her open the book. And yeah, it just gives me hope that there's more, that this book really will be about like the two of them and their journeys, probably separately is my guess. I wonder if they'll come together in this book. Like, I'm assuming they'll come together by the end. That would be weird if it was completely, that would be very Game of Thrones-ish if they had like the whole book with characters never encountering each other. But yeah, so I'll assume they'll come together by the end, but I'd like to see their journeys.
You mean come together, like be in the same physical space?
Physically
or?
together. Yeah, yeah. Not romantically. I'm guessing if they do end up romantically together, which, you know, I've got my fingers crossed for, I don't think that's going to happen in this book. I think maybe it'll happen next book if it does at all. But no, physically, like their story, like Philippa will have a storyline and Lymond will have a storyline, and then at some point those storylines are going to come together. I'm guessing in the last third of the book or something, hopefully.
Assuming that happens, Dee, what do you think is more likely? Do you think that Lymond comes home to Scotland, or that Philippa manages to make her way to Russia somehow? Or they meet somewhere in between?
That's a really good question. It would seem weird to me if Philippa goes herring off to another foreign country, but
We've seen her do it already.
She's got experience herring off to foreign countries,
Mhm.
and she has examples of women who do that. And she's seen that, and
Yeah.
so maybe she'll wander over to Moscow.
And I don't think anyone in Mid-coulter or in Scotland would be able to stop her if that's what she sets her mind to.
No way.
We've already seen that she's sort of an unstoppable force when she wants to do something for the benefit of someone else.
And she's married, which gives her a lot more freedom. And she has money, which also gives her a lot more freedom. So Philippa has a lot of choices now that she didn't have earlier. So I think that's really interesting for her.
I have a fun trivia fact for you guys, which is that Chelsea Clinton is a huge Lymond fan.
Oh.
Really?
And she goes around every so often doing interviews where she'll mention it. And there was one recently, I think in the New York Times, where she just went on about how Philippa is like her favorite character ever.
Oh, I have something in common with Chelsea Clinton.
Yeah.
That's fun.
She's one of us. And she has a much wider platform. So the more people that pick up the books because of her, the better.
Read all the
Watch our
lines.
videos.
Hope not. So let me quickly summarize. It was sort of talked about already, but what happens in this chapter is that Philippa, Archie, and Kuzum return to. They're trying to go to Flaw Valleys, but they get intercepted on the way by Sir Thomas Wharton and Austen Grey, Marquis of Allendale. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Who tells them that Kate is actually at Mid-coulter. So instead of going to Flaw Valleys, they go to Mid-coulter. Where they're received by Sibylla, Richard, Marietta, and their kids, because they've had another one. So they've got Kevin, who we already knew, and now little baby Lucy. And so the Crawfords meet Kuzum and believe, of course, that he's Lymond's and is part of their family. And then we have our big reveal that Philippa has married Lymond, and that Lymond is off with the way she explains it, the Dion de Poitiers of the East. So Lymond's not home, but Philippa's married to him and has his kid.
I thought that was a good explanation of Kiaya Gazelle and whatever we're calling her, the Diane de Poitiers of the East. I was like, oh, that makes sense. So
we also have a very subtle reference to her having received the unexpected bequest of a fortune in Venice, which I think we can assume is the Dame de Dutance's fortune that she left for Lymond, which goes to Philippa because she's his wife.
That was my assumption.
And that's why she's got this large train of donkeys and pack carts following her on her travels.
I assume that, and also for protection because Roxalana is still trying to kill her.
Yeah. I just have this image of like this very well-dressed, like self-possessed woman at the head of this train of like all these donkeys.
Thoughts on the fact that we meet Thomas Wharton and Austen Gray. So Wharton, we should remember from the first book. I think it was his son that Lymond put the heated helmet on, I think.
Yes.
And Austen Gray, who we've not met before, but who Philippa remembers from her childhood.
Is that the son of the English general that had the lisp?
Lord Grey. We don't know yet.
Okay.
You might want to guess that he's a relative since the Grey.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought.
Yeah, because I remember Lord Grey was the one that Lymond sort of made fun of when he was that when he dressed up as the Spanish man? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. God, it feels like so long ago.
Yeah. I, for some reason, feel like I'm slightly suspicious of Austen Gray. And I'm trying to figure out why I think that. There was something that kind of made me think that. I don't know. It says Austen Gray, as it happened, reached Scotland before them. Voluntary and kind-hearted harbinger. He took his horse over to. So I thought that was kind of weird. Harbinger is usually like a word that you do with like harbinger of death or something. Like it's not usually a very positive word, but he's supposed to be like a voluntary and kind-hearted. What? I don't know.
Well, you were spot on with Onofre on last book, so.
I think she's just suspicious of every new character. She's hedging her bets here.
That's true. I'm super suspicious of anyone. Like, wait a second, who are they? But I don't know. So we'll see. I'm keeping my eye on him.
They are both English, though, right? Gray and Wharton.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that, I mean, I think we're at a period where the England-Scotland troubles aren't as bad right now, but it's interesting that he sort of crossed over into Scotland to relay this message.
So we're in the like spring of 1554 right now, right? It's like end of 1553, beginning of 1554. I think
completely lost track at this point. I'm sure
that's where we are.
Yeah, there's no more timestamps, so.
Yeah, the whole lack of time thing was bothering me. But I think we're at the end of 1553 and the beginning of 1554, which means Edward VI was, Henry VIII died in the summer of 1553 and Edward VI was crowned in 1553. So it's like the beginning of his reign.
Yeah. Edward's been for a while. Hasn't he? Edward's been for a while. Henry VIII died at the start of the series.
Oh, you're right. Sorry. You're right. He dies in 1553.
Yeah.
Okay. Edward dies in 1553 in July. That's what happened in July. He dies in 1553. So then we got the Lady Jane Seymour thing that happened for like 9 days. And then Mary I is queen. So that's what's going on. Mary I is queen now.
Yeah. And there's a reference to that in the second chapter when Lymond is catching up with Guthrie and they're getting like info from, I think Hercules Tate is sending them letters, and he's saying like Charles wants to marry his son to Mary, which is what is happening. So yeah, Mary's the queen now.
So Philip of Spain is Charles's son, because she marries Philip of Spain.
Yes.
Okay.
And Charles is the emperor right now, right?
Yes.
Sure. I know that Mary I marries Philip of Spain, and she has like, everybody thinks she's pregnant, but she's not. She has this like faux pregnancy that gets everybody in a tizzy. I don't think that's happened yet. And she's only queen for like 4 years or something. 1558 is when Elizabeth becomes queen. So, okay.
But yeah, I think we can assume from the ease of which Austen and Philippa both crossed the border into Scotland that the English and Scottish are not actively at war at this time.
Yeah.
It's going to change.
Always back and forth.
Right. I wrote my notes in the back about like who did what. I can't read my own handwriting. Is what like.
You wrote on the book.
Huh?
You wrote on the book.
I all over the books since I take notes. It's my marginalia. I do marginalia. Yeah, I've got Edward VI is 1537 to 1553. So he died in 1553.
You 1547, not 37.
He was born in 1537 and died in 1553.
But he was only king from.
And he was king in 1547 to 1553. Yeah.
6 years.
Yeah, because remember the whole like plot of the first book was that they were trying to get Mary Queen of Scots to marry him.
Oh, yeah. The whole like Somerset and Warwick thing and all of that.
Yeah.
In the second book. Okay. Sorry.
So there are also many witty exchanges because we're hanging out with Kate and Sibylla, who are the wittiest people on the planet. And I do quite enjoy Sibylla's. I think we owe a great deal to your Philippa. Gray hairs, Philippa's mother suggested.
Yeah.
And yes, we already talked about the incredible entertainment of Kate not recognizing Philippa, which is also a callback to Jarrett not recognizing Philippa. And it's kind of just like a recurring motif of, wow, Philippa has really changed. But then I kind of like how the scene plays out where underneath it, she's still exactly Philippa, and that comes out very clearly.
I really like the bit when Kate stops, like they're reading her letters and journal and stuff, and Kate stops. It says, it was at the first reading that Kate stopped, letting her hand fall with a letter in it, said in tones of failing belief, but she was in the harem. Like she's just like appalled and shocked and all that. And then Sibylla said calmly, it doesn't matter. If she says she was untouched, she was untouched, and no one else need know anything about it. So she's just like, calm down, we can fix it. It'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
We do see a demonstration of what Lymond had said would happen, which is that everyone is gossiping about what happened to Philippa, and it definitely like puts her at risk.
Right.
That comes up again later, I think, in chapter 2 or 3, when they get the letter from Hercules Tate, and he's like, "Oh yes, Lymond and Philippa laid together on their wedding night."
Yeah, right.
So it's like that is a rumor that is being spread. And I think they sort of make a point that Thomas Wharton is a gossip monger.
Yeah.
So like it's going to be all over Scotland and England.
It does seem like that's kind of logical. Like they got married.
Mm-hmm.
They stayed in the same room together the night of their wedding. Like obviously we know they didn't do anything and they know they didn't do anything, but the fact that the world would assume that they did is not unreasonable, I would assume.
Yeah. And there's an interesting sort of correlation where most of the men from St. Mary's know what Lymond did with Jolita, but then when given this sort of information that Lymond probably slept with Philippa too, even though Philippa is the same age that Jolita was back then, Philippa is too young. So I think it's Adam Blacklock that feels that way.
Well, I also feel like it's just that case of everybody perceives Philippa as younger than she is, like because of her behavior and the way that she dressed and everything is when she was younger. So there's just like this assumption that so now I wonder if it's going to be the opposite. Like now that she's so put together and self-possessed and everything, if there's going to be an assumption that she's older than she is by people. I don't know.
I also enjoy Archie's extremely diplomatic explanation of Lymond's opium withdrawal to Lymond's mother, which is that he was a wee bit overcome by the weather.
A wee bit.
A wee bit.
I also like when Kate when Kate said, like, she gets the letter, she says, Kevin and Lucy were expecting a nose veil and curly toed slippers, which I think is her way of just saying, like, we all don't know what to expect, you know, and she's just kind of using the kids. And then her daughter's youthful brown eyes, losing their starkness, became visibly pink around the edges. They're in my luggage, Philippa said, with my prayer mat. Just that funny, like, sarcastic rejoinder. It was nice.
Yeah. Well, it's just they're, they start quite distanced from each other, and Philip is afraid that Kate's angry at her. Kate doesn't know how Philippa has changed, but they have this exchange that leads to them,
they hug,
hugging, yeah. And then of course we have the marriage reveal, and poor Kate being told, you seem to be Francis's mother-in-law, and Kate having this, obviously she's like super supportive of her daughter, but still having this kind of crisis of her own identity, realizing she's a widow with a married daughter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Philippa's mother was not smiling. Yeah,
I mean, and we sort of knew that she was in love with Lymond, so it's not the best news that the guy she was super into has married her daughter.
mm-hmm. Yeah, this whole bit with Richard is like, it says Richard had begun slowly also to laugh. Francis, my God, the complications. Like, you can just see, like, that's his first thought, like, oh geez, what did you do? And then seeing Kate's face, but it's all right, said Sibylla's reliable son. I love these descriptions. And putting his arm around her rigid shoulders, smiled at Philippa's sensible mother. Welcome to the clan. Philippa will stay with us for a bit and we shall look after the legal side. The annulment will be no trouble at all. And it's just like Richard, you can see Richard, like, he gets what's going on and he's just like, we're going to take care of it. And yeah.
It's good that Philippa has these very understanding and supportive people, because a lot of people in her situation wouldn't.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also interesting that we get this sort of point of view from the people that she knows and loves. I'm interested to see when she leaves Flaw Valleys or Mid-coulter to see how people will react to her. So, which we haven't gotten any of that yet.
For sure. That's going to be interesting. I also like this description of Richard. It's the page before where it says Richard's looking at Philippa. It says Richard was looking at her, the third Baron Crawford of Coulter, more heavily built than he had been, but still level-headed and pleasant, running his home of Mid-coulter, raising his children, sustaining year after year the blows which fell without warning, the traps which opened, the doors which shut in his face because of his brother Crawford of Lymond. So you do get a sense that, like, Richard is just kind of this stable presence at Mid-coulter, just kind of living his life with Marietta and the kids, and every once in a while something crazy shows up that because something Lymond did, and he'll just turn a corner and there'll be something like, oh, my brother did it, so
how much of that do you think is true, and how much of that is Richard's point of view, like in the sense of Lymond being the constant troublemaker in his life?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's definitely that. And especially because the past year and a half has been relatively quiet for them in Scotland. Lymond hasn't been around to have any scandals happen. So, and I don't know how much news they get of what's happening in Turkey.
You have to wonder how much, like, just pops up for Richard unexpectedly from the past, and I think you're right. I think it's both. Like, I think there's definitely things that Richard encounters that are just like surprises that come from the past, from things Lymond has done. But he's probably got a chip on his shoulder about it too. And, we've seen that. So.
Cool. Any other thoughts on this section?
Interesting, that bit about Philippa saying that Kiaya Khatun is until recently Dragut Rice's mistress. So we learned that she's left him, which was information that makes sense in light of the last book and the fact that he never showed up. And I kept expecting him to show up. and he never did. So
I like that she's her own independent power base, basically. Like, and you get the sense that she uses men. They're not using her.
mm-mm. Yeah, you 100% do. And I also like the thing that we find out later, that she is on this trip because she's threatened by Roxolana, not because she's threatened. Like it's women that are, she's threatened by another woman, so she has to leave. It's not, she doesn't have this like series of men that are determining her path. So
Yeah, for sure. Although I also wasn't sure how much that's true and how much that's just like her excuse. Because she and Michal seem very protected, but it is true, like probably a good idea to get out of there given what Roxolana knows about her.
Yeah, I mean, Roxolana does not seem, she seems like the execute first, investigate later kind of person. So
yeah, and she knows that Guzelle knows her secrets.
Yeah.
I'm still a little surprised Roxolana let them leave the palace the next day. Like, she just didn't take care of it all at once.
Yeah.
But I guess she had to be somewhat diplomatic about it because they were from the embassy.
Yeah, I mean, I had reason to believe that, it would be easy enough to catch them and kill them, but
yeah,
they were very clever in their underground escape.
They were good. Yeah.
All right.
Just before we move on to the next section, one more thing. I really like the interaction between Sibylla and Kuzum. And I'm curious to see how perceptive Sibylla is and whether she knows or not that there were two children and that, what happened. Because at this point, I don't think they know that part of the story.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's this.
Sibylla has her ways of knowing things that we aren't quite 100% sure of yet. So I don't know. I want to see how that sort of develops.
Like we know the story is known because we find out in chapter 2 or 3, I think somebody talks about how well two children were at risk and Lymond sacrificed, like Lymond let Gabriel's son die and saved his own. So the story is out there. It's just the flip. The identities are flipped. And so you feel like Sibylla's gonna find out about it at some point. And I think you're right. I think she's gonna figure it out.
Yeah. I also don't think she'll care. She's gonna treat the child like it's her grandson and love him and care for him. At least I hope. I mean, no, of course that's what's gonna happen. It's Sibylla. So
I mean, I hope she does figure it out because I would really like to see the scene where she comforts Lymond about that decision. Like, I think of all the people in the world who would understand what he did, it would be her.
mm-hmm. She also seems to be the first one to sort of understand the ramifications of Lymond and Philippa getting married and how it was like, oh, of course that's what needed to happen. It's like, it's okay. We'll figure it out together. Like, she's a lot more open to the idea than Kate is, so
well,
which is understandable.
Kate has other issues.
Yeah.
But yeah.
How would Richard react to finding out about the kids?
It might take him a little longer to be okay with it.
I think if Richard knew the absolute truth, he would. I think he would be incredibly angry at Lymond. Like, I think he would think Lymond made the wrong decision. Because I think Richard thinks like Jarrett thinks. That Gabriel's son isn't worth saving and blood is more important. And so.
Yeah, I think Richard and Jarrett are extremely similar people. It's too bad they don't spend more time hanging out.
No Jarrett so far.
Yeah, no Jarrett, no Marta.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get them eventually, but not having a character list for this book means you'll be a little bit more surprised when they show up, I guess.
It's driving me a little nuts, actually.
I just want one so I can keep track of all the Russian names because there are quite a few.
I think I'm going to start one in the back of the book. Just start listing all the characters and who they are.
Mm-hmm. Like all the Russian princes that we get introduced to. And I'm like, oh, I'm never going to remember these.
I know. I mean, it does help a little bit that their dad's name is in their name. So you can kind of figure out things, but Yeah, it's not totally helpful because I don't think Dmitry Ivanovich I'm gonna butcher this,
Vishnevetsky.
Vishnevetsky is, he can't be the son of Ivan that we've met, because they've said Ivan that we've met is young. So it's got to be different Ivan. Is he the brother of the Ivan that
There's
we've
lots
met?
of people with that name in Russia.
Yeah.
So again, not helpful.
Yes. All right. So jumping ahead to the next section, actually, this is the sort of shorter bit that wraps up the first chapter, which is Kiaya Hatun and her staff and her fortune all on their way to Moscow. And yes, we spend some time with this distinguished nobleman, Prince Vishnevetsky, who offers her some protection along the way, but then she sends him off with gifts, and Lymond comes in and takes his place as the sort of head of household at her side. Interestingly enough, Lymond didn't know and didn't ask where they were going until Guzel revealed it, that we're going to Moscow.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't think he cares. Like, I really don't. I think he's just like, whatever at this point. I do love this bit that she says about, it just harkens back to your ideas about like she is in control of her own destiny, where Prince Vishnevetsky, how did you say that?
Vishnevetsky.
Asks her about the next owner of the jewel, implying that the jewel is her and she's going to a new person. And she answers, I am the owner and I have chosen my jewel and my box. And it's just that was just a really nice line.
Oh yeah, she's in charge. So I took that as her jewel is Lymond and her box is Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
She's just trading up, I guess. I don't know why you'd take Lymond over Dragut, but he is cuter.
My old friend, Lymond imposter syndrome, hit me a little bit while reading this chapter. And I initially thought that Prince Dmitry Ivanovich Vishnevetsky was a new identity that Lymond was taking on. It was quickly debunked when Lymond actually shows up, but I was like, he's probably going to be back up to some of his old tricks now. So I'm looking out for new characters when Lymond isn't around to see if he's taking on different personas this time around or not.
That is true. I didn't think of that, but that's totally a good thought.
I was like
that you did.
Lymond imposter syndrome. Haven't had it in a while, so.
Also, I love the continuation of the bonkers things that people are taking with them or excuses for things, along with we're now carrying embalmed bodies into Russia. So I'm assuming they mean Egyptian mummies. Like that's what they're pretending to bring Egyptian mummies in, but actually like smuggling in rubies and gold and all kinds of stuff. But I love it's like we're bringing Egyptian mummies as a gift.
And Guzel is traveling with a veritable fortune under the false wooden bottoms of her carts. Right. So
her raisins are, some of them are raisins and some of them are rubies. Just like, that's a good disguise for rubies.
Yeah, probably like a top layer of raisins with a whole bunch of rubies on the bottom.
Yeah, they're all packed in like syrup and stuff, so it's all like, yeah, that's cool.
I also quite like how this section is contrasted with the previous section. And it sort of starts out that way. There were no children with Kiaya Hatun on the other voyage from Volos, whose character was infinitely more worldly and which partook more of the nature of an exodus. And it's like we have this scene with Philippa and the family members that's so warm and humane and down to earth, and then we have this otherworldly exodus with these mummies and this fortune and these cold, manipulative, inhuman people.
Yeah, and then it's interesting that as she moves further into Russia, we seem to get a hint that she's not quite as powerful as we thought she was, or something, because it says that she was conducted from station to station and used with deference, but not with ceremony, as one might receive an august employee. but not a person of the first reputation or rank. So perhaps there are challenges to the way she wants to be perceived, or
Well, I think part of it is that she's in disguise so they don't just get robbed. So she's pretending that they're a little bit lower class than they are.
that makes sense.
But it is also true that she's going to a place where no one would have any reason to know who she is and that she's so powerful. So it could also be, even if she does pull out her name and rank, it doesn't have sway in Russia.
Maybe. I'm intrigued.
And so then I think there's some interesting bits of Lymond that we get here. He's learning Russian and already have mastered it in a few weeks. We get his relationship with Guzel, which is they rode together in company but spoke rarely, and then on affairs of the journey. Their meals were formal. They slept and took their leisure at all times apart. And it says Guzel was content to wait and to watch and to allow him what power he wished to exert. And she thinks he's come a long way and had to travel still farther yet. So I'm curious what you think is going on with their relationship and with him and her. Oh, in the last bit, we have him acquiescent and civil as ever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're in like a flirty, sexy, like I don't think any of that is going on. Particularly on his part. Like she may be interested in forming some of that, but I don't think he is at all.
No, especially after some of the things he said in the last book about love and how he was talking to McCall about, that's not for me any longer. So,
well, yeah, he basically said he's going to be celibate.
Yeah. So I think he's definitely deep into that, and he's going to do practically the things that he needs to do for whatever her goal is or whatever she's asked him to do. But I don't think that their relationship, at least at this point, is anything other than like work relationship, like formal.
Well, he's like her employee, basically.
Yeah.
I think going back to the fact that he met her at this prearranged time and place after she did him the service of basically saving him and his friends in front of Roxolana. They had an agreement. She carried through her part of the bargain. He sold himself to her on the assumption that he was going to die anyway, so it didn't matter. And since he didn't die, but probably wishes he had, he's just going along with it.
Yeah. Yep. Also, I thought this was interesting in the last bit where it says, so she says, my friend, you're going to Moscow. He does this acquiescent and civil as ever. For greater than all her gold or her spices was this gift she was bringing to Muscovy. So Lymond is the gift that she's bringing to the Russian Tsar, which is interesting. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. She thinks that his sort of influence is going to give her a step up of power in the Russian sort of hierarchy. Is that the word? Because I mean, he's not really a king, but close enough.
It seems super unstable at this point. Like it's new, the country's new, So maybe there's opportunity in that, and she can slide in somewhere.
I mean, there's a wealth of Russian history that I don't know about that would probably help me understand a lot of what happens in the next chapter better, but
I'm so confused. Yeah.
Should we dive into the next chapter, or did you guys want to say anything else about that one?
I'm good.
Yeah, we're good. I like the next chapter.
So we return after a book away to the Men of St. Mary's. And we learn a bit about what they've been up to. Alec Guthrie was the one left in charge. And they've been in Europe, and they've just wrapped up an engagement in France. Lymond has written inviting the pick of his captains to join him in Moscow. So 8 of them decide to go, which is Guthrie, Danny Hislop, Fergie Hotham, Ludovic de Harcourt, Lancelot Plummer, Adam Blacklock, Roger Brown, and Alan Vassy. Most of those we knew from before, and Vassy and de Harcourt are both new and are Knights of St. John. Those who haven't met Lymond, led by the incredibly gossipy Hislop, speculate about what he is like. And that's basically what happens in this chapter.
Yep. It's fun.
And why was it fun?
It's just, first of all, I think the opening line sets the tone for this chapter, which is great. It's like, Russia, Christ, said Danny Hislop. What in the hell is he doing in Russia? And then Alexander Guthrie, like, very calmly just says, waiting for us. And I just love that we get this sense that this is going to be, I don't know, Danny Hislop, I think is going to be entertaining. Like whatever else he is, he's going to be entertaining. By the way, also suspicious.
Oh, very suspicious.
So suspicious.
Especially the sort of aside he has to himself at the end of the chapter.
He's so shady. So, yeah. But
I cannot. Sorry, what?
No, you're going.
Oh, no, I cannot reiterate how pleased as punch I am that Adam Blacklock is back. I think he may be one of my favorite characters so far in this series. So
why?
It's just he's got this idea that he's not good enough for the rest of his company, and we've seen time and time again in the third book that like that's just not true. That like he was a real confidant to Lymond, and like he went through his own journey in that book with like being, you know, manipulated by Gabriel with the drugs and stuff. And I really appreciate him. And I like his sort of stoic sensibility, the fact that he's an artist, and then he just doesn't think he has anything to contribute. And that's not true. So I don't know. I sort of resonate with that for some reason. So I was very pleased to see that he was one of the 8 people. I was like, please let Adam Blacklock be one of them. And he was.
So we've kind of traded Jarrett for Adam.
Yeah, and Jarrett will be back at some point.
Yeah, it didn't seem like we were quite done with him.
Yeah, no. Surely we're going to see Jarrett and Marta again. There's no way we're done with Marta, and there's no way we're done with Jarrett. So, I mean, maybe they'll be gone for the whole of this book, but that would be weird. So, hopefully.
I don't see that happening. I think they probably have been playing catch up with Lymond after he left Volos in the middle of the night. They're probably sort of maybe on his trail, but also maybe giving him some space too. Although, like, I think 3 or 4 months have passed, so you would think they would have caught up by now if they were trying to track him. Who knows? Maybe they're doing their own thing.
Maybe they got sidetracked by something. Who knows? I love this bit just to get into the chapter and like what they think of him. So Danny, so this is the bottom of 20, top of 21. Danny Hislop's bright teeth flashed in his hairless, unremarkable face. If they were afraid, they'd tear him to pieces like schoolgirls. My guess is that he's gorgeous and a terrible tease and nasty at moments, but oh, Maeve, he has such a way with him. Is he gorgeous, dear Adam? And Adam says quietly, undoubtedly gorgeous. Yeah.
We definitely see that Danny is an entertaining character. There's a bit later too where he like kisses Adam.
Yeah, it's like the next paragraph. He says, besides, I love gorgeous people. They make me feel gorgeous as well. And he kissed Adam, who'd been expecting it and did not flinch. So you get this sense that Danny's just kind of like this over-the-top flamboyant character, and they're all used to it. And so, yeah. Yeah,
he's like the class clown, almost. Like they expect that kind of behavior from him.
Yeah, which you get when the very next line is Alec Guthrie's dry voice saying, I think you should settle down. So he's just like, okay, kids.
Yeah, Alec Guthrie's like the parent.
Yeah, but we do see later that Danny, even though he's sort of this class clown, he knows his stuff. Like he's sort of the one that Lymond ends up grilling when they meet, which we'll get to, which was interesting. So
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and like Lymond and Alec have this whole exchange about him, and like maybe we shouldn't have brought him. But Lymond's like, no, he's good, and, give him a chance.
Yeah. I mean, we see that Danny is super observant,
mhm.
which is not something. I mean, it's like that doesn't put me at ease about his character, because if he plays the clown a lot, but is also super observant and insightful about things, then that's like that could be dangerous. So
It's fine.
And don't forget that we've got a Gabriel-sized hole in the antagonist department in this book now. So naturally, we're looking for somebody to fill it in, and we don't quite know who that's going to end up being yet. Guzel, Ivan, Danny Hislop, Margaret Lennox, wherever the hell she is. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Which side would the Lennoxes be on with Mary the First on the throne? Are they in power or out of power?
They're very prominent Catholics, as is Mary.
Oh, right. Okay, so they're super in power.
Yeah, there was a bit in the last book where I think Guzel was telling Lymond about what was going on in the world, and she was like, Margaret may be in line for succession if she plays her cards right.
Right. I don't see how she's going to come back into the Russia thing, but that would be interesting. Okay.
I will also just remind you that she and Philippa are both English.
True.
So we could get her through Philippa's point of view.
Any other thoughts on that section?
Before Lymond gets there?
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
All right. So the next section is the arrival in Moscow. They're taken to their lodgings, and Lymond arrives. Lymond reveals that they're there to create a national army, and they'll be there for 5 years in return for a far greater fee than anything they could get in Russia or in Europe. We then have a little aside where Lymond catches up with Guthrie about the St. Mary's situation, what they've been up to, and the situation politically in Europe. And Guthrie reveals that Hercules Tate is in Venice and has been sending them info. Lymond later asks if Hercules Tate would also write to him. As we know from Game of Kings, Lymond is very good at building a network of spies all around the world, pretty much. And then Lymond reveals that Guzel is the one who is paying for everything and that he doesn't have any money. Although actually he does, but I guess, Philippa took it all. He leaves them to gossip, which is where they gossip about him having supposedly killed the baby and married Philippa. Well, he did kill the baby, but they think he killed Gabriel's baby. And then we have the very end is this little additional section with Danny that sets off our suspicions.
Yep.
Just a personal note before we really dive in is just I've been to Moscow. I was in Moscow when I was 13. And when Dorothy keeps talking about how immense Moscow is, she's not kidding or under exaggerating. Like I remember we were taking a tour of Moscow when we were like near the Kremlin, like which is pretty much center city. And our tour guide was like, you can go 90 miles in any direction from here and you will still technically be in Moscow City. Like that's how large it is. I may have that number wrong because it was a long time ago, but for some reason that's what stuck in my head. So
yeah, so even in the 1500s, it's huge.
Yeah.
So I have never been there. So a lot of these descriptions just kind of like go in one ear and out the other, which is sort of what happened to me with Pawn and Frankincense before I had been to Istanbul. And then when I went there, it all became real and like really interesting. So I'm hoping one day I'll get to go to Russia and actually make this like real to me.
Is there a Dunnett tour in Moscow?
Well, it was just a fan like event where a bunch of fans went together to all the other ones. So it was like a one-time thing.
Mm-hmm.
They have on the like it's like the fan group society, literary society. They've been selling like guides to places from the books. And I think maybe there's one of Moscow. There's definitely one of Edinburgh that I like followed religiously when I went there.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Um,
This description of Lymond when he first shows up is such an interesting description of someone coming to meet a bunch of like mercenary fighters. And the description of Lymond is like this delicate, delicate looking gentleman in a pretty pained and pinked tunic with the finest walls, shirt bands, and a link belt of an Italian enamel work. And just this like, it's like he's so pretty.
well, and whose attic profile and unoccupied long-shafted hands caused a small moan of ecstasy to burst very circumspectly from Mr. Hislop's baby pink lips.
Right. Like he's super pretty.
And also, she's not even pretending like
Nope.
that these characters aren't, many of them, bisexual at this point.
Yeah.
And he
Or
seems
in the case
to,
of Islip, perhaps just super gay.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know the extent of it yet because we haven't spent a lot of time with Lymond yet in this book, but he seems to have recovered quite well from the opium addiction, at least in physical appearance. Like there isn't anything that sort of shows him to be sickly or malnourished or, you know, any of the other.
The whole like delicate description, it could be implying that he's thin, that he's just really still very thin and hasn't gained, you know, back the weight he's lost and stuff like that, perhaps.
I think once we see more of him or see him in action in this book, then we'll be able to tell a little bit more of the long-term repercussions of his addiction. So
yeah, he certainly seemed to be physically threatening enough that in chapter 3 he holds off all the guards. So yeah.
One thing that's sort of interesting is to read about, if you can just Google like the after effects of recovery from opiate addiction. But there is some stuff around like the positive emotions take time to come back because your body got dependent on this artificial source of them and then is like less sensitive to the natural ones.
Yeah.
I'm probably not explaining that well, so I encourage
No, that makes sense.
to read up on it.
Yeah, it's like either your serotonin or your dopamine, I forget which one, is artificially depressed because of you had artificial stuff, and so it's you can't get that happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think we'll talk about it as we read through the chapters, but Lymond's very emotionally flat.
yeah.
That makes sense.
I mean, we do see it a little bit here and the way he talks to his men. I mean, a lot of it is just he's trying to accommodate them to how things are done in Russia. But like the whole, we will not use first names with each other. Like there will be no untoward showing of emotion. Like that's just not how things work here in Russia.
Yeah. It's also interesting that he describes Russia as like it's a culture or a society with a top and a bottom, but no middle. So it's like, and you can't, like there seems to be very little interaction socially between the top and the bottom. So like you can't, you know, fraternize with the men, you can't joke around, you can't do any of that sort of jovial, we're all on the same team kind of thing. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I very much read this as a slightly thinly veiled excuse for Lymond to be like, we will show no emotions because I am a robot and I don't have emotions now.
Let's see. There is I do like this very succinct summary of their goal on 25, which is the 9 of us to find out what exists and plan what we want to exist, to create the prototypes and instruct the instructors, and then to muster and train and equip a national army. So like that is their stated goal. And I'm intrigued to see if there are hidden goals. Like that's the stated goal. So like what are the
Well, there's also a description of Lymond in the first chapter as this like hard-edged mercenary. And you know, this whole we're going to go there and build an army is aligned with that. And if you're a new reader coming in for the first time, it's all set up so that that's your idea of Lymond, this hardened mercenary. But we, knowing Lymond, know that that's not who he is underneath at all. He's a musician, and an actor and a silly, playful person. And so I think one, she's doing the thing that like she did in Game of Kings with Will Scott, and she did in Disorderly Nights with Jarrett, and I guess somewhat with Liam Rowe too in the second book, where she's once again setting us up to have this surface picture of Lymond, and sort of Danny is seeing it that way, for example, and also as a reader, as a new reader, you're seeing it that way. But then there's like, okay, but what's really going on underneath? And then I think the other thing is like, how long can Lymond be okay with this? Like, I am a mercenary and that's all I am, because we know there's more underneath.
Right.
Mhm.
Yep.
I enjoyed at the top of page 24 that Alec Guthrie calls him Francis.
Yeah.
So now we've got another,
we've
maybe
had
a
six?
sixth person.
Yeah.
Well, but Lymond definitely shuts it down and is like, no more first names. So
Mhm.
I think like that's a really interesting moment actually, because it's also, it starts out he was the same or very nearly the same. Relief flooded through Adam, and beside him Alec Guthrie smiled also and said Francis. But they're both completely wrong. He's not in any way the same, even if he looks it, and he doesn't even go by Francis anymore.
Yeah, but I think that's interesting that like Lymond shuts that down, but it doesn't change the fact that Alec Guthrie is someone who calls him Francis. So like that is still a thing, even though Lymond is trying to, put the kibosh on that. So
even after a year and a half of not interacting
on
a physical level.
So there is more than 6 people, or however many we counted. I don't think we counted Richard in that either, right? So there's.
No, we did.
Oh, did we?
It was 5. It was Sibylla, Richard,
Marta, Jarrett,
Jarrett, and Archie.
It was 6 with Marta.
Oh, she was the 6th, yeah.
No, I counted her. Philippa, Richard, Marta, Archie.
You can watch the other video. Okay. Also, probably one of the funniest lines of dialogue is on page 24. Well, actually, there's so many. First of all, there is the fact that Ludovic de Harcourt had come to replace Jarrett Blythe. And Lymond says, also departed. The beauty of worthy things is not in the face, but in the backside, endearing more by their departure than by their address. Which is Lymond's like word on Jarrett and his beautiful backside.
Hate to see you go, but I like to watch you leave.
So maybe Jarrett and Marta actually did catch up to Lymond already, and he sent them away, and we just haven't seen that sort of play out yet.
Maybe,
or maybe they
got a nice ass. And what's going on it?
I mean, sure.
This whole bit about like, Sir, my Lord Jesus.
That was the one I was also going to say. Sir will do, unless you receive divine witness to the contrary.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll see. De Harcourt wants to fight Muslims in Russia, so
yeah, and Lymon's like, no religious agendas here. We're here for
probably not.
That's that Knights Hospitaller upbringing coming back.
Yeah. I do think though that it like, because Lymond is he's witty here, but he's much more shut down than he used to be. Like Danny's here to almost feel like the sort of chaotic humorous role that Lymond himself would have been filling in the earlier books.
Yeah. Also, so it's interesting, like Lymond, we get this thing at the bottom of 25 where Danny says, he's like, I only said you were gorgeous. Like they're talking about what they're saying. And Francis Crawford threw down the card he was holding. So first of all, Francis Crawford, he says. Francis Crawford threw down the card he was holding. The buffoon of the party, he said. You have, I'm sure, enlivened the long summer evenings round the campfires. Your men, I'm certain, find your quips irresistible and your effrontery something to talk about, slapping their knees with their girlfriends. With me, you refrain. And so he's just like, no.
Yeah. We don't have fun here. Lymond
Yeah.
definitely isn't going to have any fun.
Yeah.
So there was something that happened here that I missed. Is he literally holding a card that has like something on it? Or is that just a phrase? Like something happens and Lymond decides to call out to Harcourt.
Oh, he was gossiping. Lymond goes to Harcourt, and Danny says, "It was me. I only said you were gorgeous." So I assume like Lymond was talking and he was like whispering under his breath, and Lymond was calling out like, "Don't talk while I'm talking."
All right.
Yeah. And so then Danny, like hanging his head, was mouthing a long and inaudible apology. So he kind of was like, sorry, I didn't mean to. So we'll see if he's truly sorry.
But
Now this is when Danny sort of gets grilled and he answers all the questions correctly. Like he's giving Lymond exactly the answers Lymond's looking for.
And he's also asking good questions, like to set up his analysis of what's happening. He's asking Lymond the right questions, which I think is interesting as well. So he knows his stuff.
Yeah.
And quite notable that Lymond asks, how would you defend this house that we're in right now? And in fact, there's a very good reason he asked that. He has an inkling that they're going to have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I also think it's notable that he tells them after 5 years, you can take your fortune and go. And Guthrie says, well, what about you? And he says, you need not, I think, concern yourself about me. So again, there's, what is he really up to? No human connection, you know.
Is he going to be dead by then? Is that what he's thinking? You know?
Yes, and then we have the bit where he catches up with Guthrie, and it's on page 27, where Guthrie heard from Hercules Tate that the Emperor Charles will marry his son to Queen Mary of England.
Yep. So she definitely marries Philip of Spain. So that must be his son. I guess.
I think so. I will Google it so we can be sure.
Yeah. And then we get this sense that Hercules is going to be sending like intel to Lymond, perhaps.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so keep going to 28. Is his reveal of I have no financial resources. Everything that we're doing is being paid for by Guzel. And they talk about her. She's a kingmaker.
Mm-hmm. And I like that Guthrie does not like the smile. Since he was smiling, Guthrie found, although he did not greatly care for the smile. So Guthrie is picking up something in Lymond's telling of all this that he's uncomfortable with, which seems reasonable on his part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Guthrie knows, we're kind of getting this idea, right, that Guthrie knows Lymond the best of any of them except Adam, probably, and that he sees that Lymond is not quite right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's starting to see it after thinking he's exactly the same.
Yeah, he's gonna pick up on things, I assume. And then we get this, so then we know that Jarrett not only thinks that Lymond chose Gabriel's son to die, but that he's telling people about it. Because Fergie Hotham is telling this story about Lymond killed Graham Mallard. He engineered the death of Jolita, but didn't hold the sword personally, and he had to choose between Jolita's boy and his own, or so Jarrett Blythe says. So he saved his own, and that's only human. So Jarrett is telling the story to people.
Philip is indeed the son of Charles, by the way. Thank you, Wikipedia. Lymond is also very like my way or the highway. If you object to my money, my rule, or my ethics, you have a remedy. You simply open the door and walk out of it.
Mm-hmm.
They're not a democracy. And it's just very cold.
Mm-hmm. What was our sense? I've forgotten. Did we think that Adam had a crush on Lymond I forgot what we thought about their relationship.
I mean, doesn't everybody in this book have a crush on Lymond?
That's true. Because Adam's response to the news about Lymond being married is a little drastic. Like he says, by all accounts, he married, 6 heads shut up. Adam Blacklock said married in italics, which again, anytime anything is in italics, I pay attention. And Guthrie, who'd been minding at some cost his own business, which I also like that, been minding at some cost his own business, put down a spoon and said, yes, married. What does it matter? It's nothing to do with our prospects here. And so then we have this speculation about who he married. And Guthrie said, it's Philippa Somerville. And Adam got up from the table. He said, she's too young to bed with. Not quite. So Adam seems to be having a negative response to the news that Lymond has married Philippa.
It also could be because, you know, Adam was part of the retinue that was there the night of Jolita. So like he sort of had this idea of Lymond being this ladies' man and like sleeping around a lot. So the fact that he settled down, that might be a little confusing to him.
And he could genuinely think that Philippa's too young because everybody thinks she's younger than she is.
Mm-hmm.
And his memory of her is of like, she's like 13 or something, 14.
Yeah, I think part of it when he finds out it's Philippa is that he's just genuinely concerned for Philippa. But like, I never thought Adam had a crush on Lymond. Not certainly.
I just couldn't remember. I didn't think so either, but I couldn't remember.
I think he has like an artist's interest in an intriguing subject, but I don't think it's like romanticizing him the way that others do.
He was just so like, what? To that news that I was like, wait a second, did I miss?
Yeah, because like Lymond was like his subject that he was studying, and like nowhere in his study of the subject did that he's gonna get married like come in.
Right. Yeah.
It's also like I feel like it's very similar to what George R. R. Martin does in Game of Thrones, where we hear how gossip like twists, and so we have the gossip of Lymond bedded Jolita before he killed her and her brother, and her baby went the same way in Turkey. Like, yeah, he's just assassinating this Mallet family like maliciously, and it's like that's definitely not what happened.
Not what happened. Yeah.
Then even the more like generous interpretation from Fergie is that you know, he saved his own child and that's only human.
Mm-hmm. Also not what happened.
Yeah, no one would think of what, you know, he actually did.
Yeah.
And then we conclude then with Danny's little verdict. What did you guys make of that?
I mean, but what he may not know, Maeve, is that I'm a clever bastard as well. That certainly implies that Danny has an agenda that is not Lymond's agenda.
Mm-hmm.
What is Danny's agenda?
No idea yet.
No clue yet. I don't think
literally just met him this chapter.
Yeah.
Interesting that he calls him a bastard. Does he know something that we don't know?
Mm.
Or is he just using bastard as, you know, a term and not what a bastard really means here?
Yeah. Also, it's weird that if you would think like this Maeve thing is just like a phrase that, you know, it's like you say like, oh God, blah, 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 something. But he appears to be directly addressing someone. Like, you'd be surprised that Maeve was a shrewd, clever bastard, not to his face, dear. Like, he seems to actually directly be addressing an entity as opposed to just a throwaway comment. So that's weird. Like, seems odd.
Who is Maeve? What does she represent? I don't know yet.
Person?
We glossed this over, but I think Danny actually is a bastard. He says earlier he's the bishop's bastard. Now, whether or not he was just joking, I don't know, because that seems to be well within his character to joke about something like that. But
I assumed he wasn't joking when I read.
I assume it's true.
So that could be interesting.
Yeah.
So does he know, does that I'm a clever bastard too, does that imply that he knows something or thinks he knows something about Lymond's heritage? Is that going to come up again?
Yeah. I'm definitely going to keep my eye on this Danny and see what he's bringing to the story, because we know Dorothy doesn't just put stuff in for the heck of it. Like, this is very important. It's vital to the story, and it's going to lead somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, it's also the last line of the chapter, which clearly is telling. So
yeah,
we're going to find out something.
Hard to take your eyes off, Danny, to be honest. I don't think you're going to forget.
Well, he's intriguing so far. I mean, you know, he's just been introduced, and I'm already like, what is his story?
Interesting character.
Other thoughts on the chapter?
Nope.
All right, next chapter. I'm just going to summarize the whole chapter because it's a lot of action and it cuts back and forth and back and forth.
Sure.
So it's all about their meeting with the Tsar. So we start out with this brief scene preceding the meeting where the men are speculating about Guzel and what she looks like, and Lymond and Guzel have a brief conversation leading into the meeting with the Tsar, where Lymond via Guzel has given him a gift of 6 prototypes of the newest guns from the West, as part of this whole negotiation around we can make you, powerful by building you an army that can compete with the West. Lymond is his typical rude self, maybe on purpose as a negotiating ploy to show strength, but it makes things quite tense. The men get sent back to their lodgings while Lymond continues the negotiations. And the men get attacked by the Tsar's men. So they conclude that it's either they're really going to be killed or it's a demonstration of their skills. Either way, they need to fight to the death and not surrender. So they fight, and we intercut between the fight and then the Lymond calmly negotiating as his men are fighting for their lives. Our 2 red shirts that we just met, Vasey and Brown, both die. And because they sort of at the end of this, the men who are left realize that they don't have much chance, they decide to set the city on fire with fire arrows. Ivan then bursts in on Lymond's negotiations and orders him killed since, he set the city on fire. So Lymond takes the Tsar's favorite Adashev hostage and negotiates a deal that he ends up coming out ahead, where Ivan eventually agrees to this deal to pay him a ton of money to build an army in return for the men putting out the fire. And the men are ready to mutiny, but then Lymond's like, well, you're all going to get 4,000 rubles. And so they all are like, okay, we'll go along with this after all. And that's a chapter.
Yep.
I don't know how much 4,000 rubles would translate into today's dollars, but I guess it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Presumably so.
So I guess in the very first section, I wanted to ask you guys, what did you think about the exchange between Lymond and Guzel and what it reveals about the 2 of them?
I like that line about it's axiomatic to select the right armor, whatever the battle. And so it's just like this idea that everything you do is a battle and you dress for it. And, this is like you dress appropriately for the battle in front of you. And then, I mean, at least, there's always meanings behind meanings and whatever, but Lymond says, if you want Russia, mistress mine, you shall have it. So there's some indication that Guzel is after power in Russia. I mean, obviously she is, but it seems more explicit. So.
Well, and it's also set up very much like he is serving her. She wants Russia, so he'll get it for her. He calls her his mistress.
Yeah.
And she's kind of coaching him, where like he's commenting on the number of rings and she says, no, the Tsar is the supplicant. So she's kind of like, you're dressed right for this situation and he's like our supplicant rather than the other way around. And I think also we have his unmoved cornflower eyes. So like he's going into this whole super intense situation with, it's Lymond, so he doesn't usually show his emotions on the surface anyway, but like in a very like calm way, like whatever happens, he probably doesn't really care whether they win, whether they lose, whether he dies, whether he doesn't. Like he'll do his best, but it's all like the logical side driving.
Yeah. Yep.
And it also reminded me of like when she says the czar is a supplicant, it's like the same kind of reversal of assumptions that we got when she's like, no, it's I'm the master, it's my jewel, it's my box. Like, the people who have the power are not who you would think at first glance. And it's usually her. She's the one with the power.
Yeah. I mean, we get another indication later. So we have this whole explanation of who he is, et cetera, on 34. And then it says he's to be cultivated as the hawk is to be cultivated. So that's another sign that like the czar, there's this perception of the czar as a tool, perhaps. Like the hawk, to cultivate a hawk is not the one in charge. Like you don't, I mean, from what little I know of falconry, you sort of have a partnership with the hawk. The hawk doesn't become, it's not like a beast of burden. Like you have to actually convince the hawk to work with you, but the hawk is not in charge in that relationship. So that's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they're treating Ivan like their like mechanism to gain their own power. They're not there to serve him. They're there to use him for their ascension.
Which is interesting.
We also get some setup of the political situation, which I really kind of glaze over, but at a high level, Ivan has to conquer the Crimean Tartars and wishes to enter Europe and the civilized world through trade to the west through the Baltic. And in order to do that, he must have a trained army. So basically, Lymond and Guzel are there because they know what he wants, needs an army, and so they think they can get in with him by providing him that army. And then we get the whole thing. There's never been an organized army in Russia. The Tsar appoints a general or voivoda, who'd be like the leader of the fighters, but then the officers are like relatives and nobles, and like princes. And then they do have the Streltsy, which is the permanent hackbutters, but it sounds like that's not that big. And like there's some free settlers, Cossacks you can call on, but basically there's no history of having like a formal standing army. And so Lymond, the whole idea is this is something that's going to be very tempting and valuable for him because he's never had it before. He doesn't know how to make one, and it would get him his goals.
Yeah. And he definitely needs people who understand it to do it. He can't do it on his own. So
yes.
Yeah. This perspective where we get on 37 with from Adam's perspective, where he's talking about Ivan and how young he is. And he says, in years and ability, and it seemed likely in pure intellectual arrogance, there was not all that much to choose between Francis Crawford and the sovereign Grand Prince Ivan Vasilievich. A shiver of foreboding traveled up Adam's spine, etc. And so I'm like, that's an interesting take.
Makes me wonder who's older, Francis or Ivan.
Oh Lord, I don't want to get into the age thing.
Well, we know Lyman's 26.
Everybody's in their mid-20s. I'm just saying that. But I thought that was interesting, like how observant is Adam, because we know Adam's an artist and he is observant. And
and I love the bit on the previous page where we get the description going into Moscow from Adam's point of view. So it's totally an artist's vision of the city and the spiraled architecture and stuff. And then you have this moment, then Lymond said briefly Blacklock, and he found whatever, so it's like he got lost in it.
He got distracted.
That's Adam.
Yeah. So and we get a sign that Lymond has perfected his Russian, or he has excellent Russian.
Yeah.
So
he's like a savant with languages, basically.
yeah. Which that's a real thing. I know someone like that. So one of my high school friends' older brother was like that. He could just pick up languages. He was like 19 and spoke 7 or 8 languages and just picked them up on for fun. So
my friend in 4th grade, his older sister, could do that. Yeah.
yeah. So it's like that does exist. It's a real thing.
Also, so I'm just jumping ahead a little bit. It's on page 40. For a little more of that context, is that the English have opened up a new shipping route by the frozen sea to the north coast of Russia. Their pilot chancellor was in Moscow last year. If the English want to trade here, we help them. So we have a connection, and we have an explanation for why the map shows London and Moscow and how they relate to each other. And we have a connection between Philippa's story and Lymond's story, which is the English trying to open up a trade route with Moscow.
Oh, I see. Okay. So wait, where's Moscow? Okay. So they go, I'm just looking at the map. So they go, like the trade route would go from London up over Norway, and then perhaps down the rivers to Moscow, a little bit overland, but
yeah, or at least like over like to land and then like overland to Moscow. Yeah, I'm not sure which. Yeah.
Right. Which would be probably far safer and easier than trying to trek through France and Poland and Lithuania and all of that into Moscow.
Yeah, and especially because we got told that like Poland and Lithuania, or at least Poland, is hostile to Russia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I thought this was the interesting little exchange where you get this thing between Lymond and the Tsar, and we don't know what it is because I think we're still in Adam's perspective at the bottom of 38. And he says, like, lifting his voice, he made a single harsh comment, hard and fast as a ricochet. Lymond answered him, displeasure distinct in his face. The emperor replied with 3 words, then turning his shoulder began to address the black-attired man on his left. And then the secretary tells them that they're dismissed. So I thought that was really interesting on Dunnett's part to give us this scene from Adam's perspective, and he doesn't understand what's being said. And I liked the tension that created just from a writing perspective. It was cool.
Oh yeah. Well, and then we get the reveal like a couple pages later of what the exchange was, and it was the Tsar saying that no highborn prince or even the most blessed head of his most holy church had ever laid claim to fees of such magnitude. Mm-hmm. And Lymond says that that's possibly why, as he had observed, the Crimean Tartars have been driven out neither by a princely campaign nor by a miracle. So Lymond just snarkily talked back to the Tsar. No wonder he sends people to kill them.
Yeah.
And I think it's just so interesting how Lymond is playing with fire here, and we're like, is he making the wise choices to prove himself, or is he just like poking the bear and getting people killed? And it's really, I feel like it's really ambiguous because you get the scene from the men's point of view as they're getting their asses kicked and several of them are dying, and it's like, I don't know how sympathetic I am to Lymond here. I mean, he was very like, I can't promise you anything, come to Russia, see what happens, but
yeah.
like, it's pretty harsh.
Yeah. And he also, it does say like Lymond, they have this hypothetical scheme of defense, and Lymond, not hypothetically at all, had desired them to keep it before them. So we do have a sense where he's trying to prepare them a little bit, but if as you say, like his emotional stability is not great, or he's not, perhaps his judgment isn't great because of the opium withdrawal, then he's not preparing them enough, or he's not like circumspect enough with the Tsar, things like that.
Well, and it's just very, very cold to bring them there and be like, I'm not, we're not calling each other by name, I'm not treating you like people, and like a few of you are going to die as part of this ploy that I'm doing, and I don't really care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I mean, he's also just like, he's like, I'm selling myself to Guzelle, I'm going to get her the power that she wants. Like, all of this is very not the Lymond that we knew before.
Right. Because he was so adamant about not being a tool, right? It was actually a huge motivating factor of his in book 2 and book 3. And like he's in book 1, like he doesn't want to be a political tool of people in power. And yet that's exactly what he's doing here, is becoming a political tool. So
I mean, and we can also wonder like how much of this is what's really going on. Is he doing something else underneath the surface? Like,
It's true. This is Lymond we're talking about.
there could be like 4 goals that we have completely clueless about at this point. So who knows?
who knows?
And then some people die.
Yes.
Alan Vassy, who we don't care about at all.
Yeah,
Poor
him and then the other guy. Like we just met them, and she kind of gives it away because when she introduces them all originally, she just calls those 2 by their last names, and like she does give them first names later, but like already it's like the 2 you just introduced by last name and like rapidly killed off are clearly like they're not important. We got a lot to take in. Let's just barely.
Brown dies, Vassy dies, like fine.
And they were both the Knights. I was gonna say Knights Templar. They're both Knights from Malta, right?
One of them was Vazzy was. The other guy, the other one is Daharcourt, who's still alive.
Right. He was the other knight. Okay.
I keep calling them Knights Templar in my head too. Like, that's not what they are in my head. I know it's not true.
It's Piddler.
Yeah.
So,
completely different group of knights.
So there's a description, and it's just super like interesting, the contrast between Lymond's negotiations and then the men fighting for their lives. And there's this description of Lymond with flat-toned and lizard-eyed patience on page 48. And I feel like that's just kind of like the epitome of Lymond in these chapters. Like he probably knows his men are dying, and yet flat-toned and lizard eyes. And we know he always can like put on a veneer, but it's very like we're definitely being set up to be like how much is a veneer and how much is him just being like a mess.
Yeah. I do like this bit on 47 too, where we get another reason Adam is one of our favorite characters, where they say like, let's set fire to the city. And Adam says, it's a city of wood. There are 30,000 houses out there full of men and women and children. And then Danny Hislop's like, yeah, and a bunch of them are trying to kill me, so I don't care. He says, a good proportion are trying to kill me. Excuse me while I protest. And then he fires the first arrow at Guthrie's signal. So I like that Adam's like, wait a second, do we want to be
sure we want to kill all these people?
Like,
it's the Tsar's attention.
Yeah. So we have also the lure of what Lymond is offering, and what he offers through the army he's going to build is, he says, men have made such strides that you can hardly imagine them. Painting, science, writing, music and medicine, the rule of the sea and the stars, the working of metal, the making of ships and of engines. So he's kind of like, because they're in the early Renaissance in Europe, so he's kind of like offering to bring the Renaissance to Russia, basically.
Well, he's got such an advantage because he also has knowledge from the Middle East and the Islamic world, which is equally great, if not greater in some ways. And so he's got these 2 sources of massive advancements in science and art and math and all of that. So
yeah. Do you think it's true that he can give the Tsar the Renaissance by building him an army? Like, can he really give him this culture through violence?
I'm gonna say no. That seems unlikely, but I'm not Lymond, so it would seem like you'd want to import some artists, maybe some philosophers.
Oh, he did bring the men of St. Mary's.
Yeah,
He brought Adam.
he brought Adam.
There's your artist.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you can't bring art into a country if the country isn't around anymore. So by having the army to defend it and, you know, take care of whatever problems may arise, it's a step in that direction.
Yeah. And to open up trade with the West to make it easier.
Yeah. I mean, trade would definitely do it. Like the more exchange there is between cultures, the more you get. Yeah.
Other stuff you guys want to highlight or share that you thought about this chapter?
I just like the way that he grabs, you know, Alexei Adashev, and he just it's just so calm in the way he does it. He grabs it and he sticks a knife in his throat and he's like, let us discover who wishes to see Alexei Adashev dead. You know, he's just like, let's see what happens to this.
Well, and it's also a political ploy because this guy is the Tsar's favorite. So if the others were to go after him, it would be like revealing the rivalry and like selfish on their own part, you know.
Right. Who's willing to do this?
Yeah.
And then there's a bit where the Ivan, he says, may dogs defile your mother. Ivan Vasilievich says deep in his chest, free my officer. So there's a little bit of this like guttural like depth of emotion, which just gives this insult about insult.
Well, and we get the Tsar like super emotional actually in this scene, like because it's like his friend and he's like sobbing, forgive me, Alexei, but he must die. Like I'm gonna let my best friend die so I can kill this, you know, Scottish jerk.
Yeah.
There's sort of a revelation that Ivan may not be entirely in control of his men, though, because I think that the insinuation is that he certainly did send the men to test, but that there may be other people. It says on 53, not everyone wants to see the Tsar with his own private army. So that like some of the men in this attacking party or the commanding it took it a little further than the Tsar had meant it to be.
Yeah, you get the feeling that the setting fire to Moscow like is of course horrific to Ivan because of a previous fire that had killed like thousands and thousands of people. Sort of like London is freaked out about fire to this day because of the fires of London. So you get the sense that like it went way too far and he's blaming the Scots, but you know, it also went way too far on his side.
Yeah, well, and Lymond's probably poking at that too, to be like, you have people around you that you can't trust. Here I am offering, you know, whatever you want.
I'm also intrigued by this Alexei Adashev guy because he's the one who kind of calms everything down at the end. You know, Ivan says, you say so, and he says, I say so, for there is an effrontery which will bring us to maggots or to conquest sweet as the magic well, which shall never want water. So, you know, yeah, we're either going to make it or we're not going to make it, but there's potential. And so then the Tsar listened to him. So that's interesting to me because if this guy is like a moderating force on the Tsar, which he seems to be, are we going to have a disaster if somebody kills him? Or like, is there some, I don't know, I'm intrigued with him.
Any other thoughts?
Ivan forgives Lymond after kind of deliberately humiliating him, which is interesting.
Well, yeah, and that whole scene is very like Lymond is on this like tight rope and life and death on either side, and Ivan could have very easily killed him in that moment. And Lymond takes the gamble, probably because Lymond doesn't care either way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this relationship between Ivan and Lymond is going to be very tense and sort of back and forth, I think, throughout whatever happens for the rest of this book. So it's an interesting way to start it off.
Yeah. And interestingly, the chapter ends with Danny again. So, you know, first lines are important and last lines are important. We've just had 2 chapters that ended with a comment from Danny Hislop. So,
and Danny being quite practical, right? Like a second ago, he was ready to mutiny, and now he's like, "Oh, that's a lot of money. I guess that does make a difference."
Yeah. makes a difference. Yeah. So.
Not a person who seems to be driven by any moral considerations the way that Adam sometimes is.
No. And I thought the same was also true of the French knight.
Darfur.
Yeah, because he said something about how I want to fight Muhammad in Russia. And then Lymond kind of shuts that down with like, no, we could be fighting like Lithuanian Christians. And then his next line is, oh, well, if they pay me, I'll fight whatever. So it's kind of like, he's like, I've got this moral stance. And then it's like, oh, never mind the money.
Well, I mean, if you were going to join a mercenary troop, you have to be willing to fight for money. That's like the whole point.
Right. But it's kind of funny that he kind of like, no, I've got this motivation. And then it's like, no, we might have to fight some Christians. He's like, okay, never mind.
Yeah. So what did this is like obviously the kickoff. What did you expect from the rest of the book based on this?
Lots of intrigue, political intrigue, power manipulations between Güzel and Lymond and Ivan, and I don't know. We'll keep jumping back to Scotland and England to see how Philip is doing.
Yeah, I really like this tension between Lymond and Ivan. I think this is a very interesting dynamic that they have. It'll be interesting to see the dynamic between Güzel and Ivan, which we haven't really seen yet. So intriguing. The men, it'll be interesting to see how the men function and all this. I mean, we've seen them kind of put together an army before. We've seen in Disorderly Knights, we've seen this like building up of a force thing. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
And like, we know how capable they are. Like, they handled that attack the best that they could. The fact that only 2 of them died when faced up against 40 or 50 men trying to get into this terribly hard to defend place, like, they held their own.
Yeah, it's the implication seemed to be sort of like there's nobody better. Like there's not a group of 8 men that could have done better than these 8 men did. So yeah, that's, I don't know. I'm intrigued to see this play out. Are we gonna actually have building a standing army? Is that where it's gonna go? Are we gonna have something else? What's Philippa gonna do? Like, I'm super interested to see what Philippa's gonna do, because we don't really have a challenge for her yet. You know, there's not an obstacle for her yet, or what her story's gonna be. So that will be
reintegrated to society after being in the harem of the Sultan of Turkey.
Yeah, like take her place as a woman of stature and poise.
Yeah, and now the wife of an enemy of England.
Yeah,
fun times.
Yeah, and also, I mean, we haven't really talked about this at all either, but how will Kazum integrate into this very, very foreign society that he doesn't know how to? I mean, obviously he's a little kid, but this is all going to be very bizarre to him as well. So
none of this is his fault.
Yeah. And is Archie going to stick around, I hope?
Yes.
Archie.
Interesting how Archie has transferred from Lymond to Philippa.
Yeah.
All right. Any final thoughts to share?
I like where this book is going so far. So we'll see if it keeps it up. I'm sure it will.
I'm still sad about the other book.
Cross your fingers for no dead babies.
But I like this book. Yeah, I'm glad I'm continuing to read. I'm glad the story's going forward. I'm still sad, but I'm looking forward to what happens here.
Yep.
Thank you everyone for watching. As always, we appreciate your comments. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.
Yep.